So, this is a topic which has quite a lot of variance in it. We're talking about the leadership that created the Liberty ships. Now, I will say something about this, and it's something which needs to be remembered. I have used the books I have available for this. And, well, there is one book I ordered which has yet to arrive, and I need to record this. So, Ships for Victory, which is by Frederick C. Lane, which is a history of shipbuilding under the U.S. Maritime Commission in World War II, published in 2001. An excellent text, I'm told. I don't have available. I haven't managed to get it here in physical form. I've had the Kindle version, but the Kindle version is not really the same, and I'm not even sure it's a proper Kindle version, considering every time I look at Amazon it doesn't have a Kindle version for sale yet. I somehow seem to have a PDF of it. Ah well. Merchant Ship Types. An interesting one, published by R. Munro Smith. It's got allows you to do a good comparison of the other merchant ships in World War II and what various nations had going on at various points. Then we have L.A. Sawyer and W.H. Mitchell's The Liberty Ships. It's a pretty good read. It really does emphasize some of the Anglo-centric points of view, though, of the design history. And it is worthwhile noting that the US Maritime Commission does end up following a very, I would say, British pragmatic approach. But that's more because their own initial instincts, and we'll talk about this as it goes on, is to design something which is perfect, amazing, futuristic. And the trouble is it's going to be very complicated and very, very professional to build it. And you want something which can be built as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And the thing which actually decided the start of this question, because this question was supposed to be something to do with about the Kaiser shipyards, and well, I thought I'll do the whole Liberty ship story, but I have got Liberty Factory, which is the untold story of Henry Kaiser's Oregon shipyards by Peter J. Marsh, which is a really good read. A really good read. And those are the three books I'm basing a lot of what I'm going to say off. So I do admit that those three books are what is coming through, and the book which was literally about the history of the US Maritime Commission is going to give me all the sort of involved bits about them, hasn't arrived yet. But when that book does arrive, and to be fair, that book probably cost more than this video will actually make. I'm realistic about how much my videos make. I will probably do a video about that as well. I will probably do a more in-depth video about the US Maritime Commission in World War II and what they got up to, because they had a very interesting war. They really did. And yeah, this video is the first of the members' suggestions videos. Now, originally I was going to do it the other way around, but I've spun them around. Because, well, the members' suggestions, when they came in, I thought, there's one I'll definitely do first, and there's one I'll do second, and then I went, actually, no, I'll do them the other way around, because the way the books and information came through, it made sense to go with Cody 88's, a video on the men running the Kaiser shipyards would be good, and the Kaiser shipyards are all about the Liberty ship program. So yeah, I did a comment on the community section of this channel, and I'm going to continue to do that occasionally. I'm going to do comments on the community section going, well, I've got a couple of free Tuesdays coming up. Anyone with suggestions for them? Anyone with topics they'd like to see there that will fit within the year of leadership or the year of whatever we're doing, maybe the year of destroyers. We'll see. And so here is what we have. Where does the Liberty ship, where does the US Maritime Commission in World War II come in? Well, in 1939, American shipyards had a nucleus, this was a core train strength, of less than 20,000 skilled labourers. I want you to think about that. Less than 20,000. They were concentrated overwhelmingly in 7 major yards in terms of the large number of experienced labourers. And that's according to the Commission's own report. Now, this is what the Merchant Marine Act of 1936 and the Maritime Commission it created was built to solve. And by their existence of 3 years, they had not moved the needle a single jot. But they'd assessed the problem, and it had taken them a long time to get through the problem because you had yards jumping around with going, well, we've got all these labourers, but they were unskilled. They were unskilled, untrained, and are therefore far cheaper. So the problem you have is that you have a large number of yards who have a very small nucleus of maybe a couple of dozen, the smaller yards just have a couple of dozen of actual skilled labourers, and then the rest of them will be unskilled assistants, unskilled mates, unskilled whatever they were called at the various points in various yards differently. And they made up the huge bulk of the workforce. Now, again, you could say, well, the unskilled are on their way to being skilled. Well, you'd think that, but the way the yards were being run, it wasn't the case. You see, a skilled labourer cost wages. And so a lot of yards were focusing on keeping the number of skilled labourers as low as they physically could. But this had an effect on the ships you could produce, and produce at speed. And well, this is the one of the reasons why the Liberty ship program ends up going the route it does. Because you start off with having a program which is looking at designing probably the finest ships you could possibly do for the various types of ship they're looking at. They're looking at multiple different ship types. They would be turbine powered, they'd have beautiful curves, they'd have everything you'd ever dream of in a merchant ship. They would be the merchant hulls built for the 20th century. They would be glorious. But very quickly you realise that if you're going to be assembling something that complicated, that's perfect, that brilliant, you're going to need a tremendous amount of skilled labour, and you don't have that. You have a lot of people who are untrained, and frankly, in terms of the Kaiser shipyards, you have people who have virtually no training at all, virtually no experience at all, are taken on, and are used. And, you know, Henry Kaiser advertises to hire 20,000 people. 20,000. That's what he's sort of buying. He's actually hiring more people than they had actually working in shipyards in 1939. And in many ways, the Liberty ship program is a factorization of shipbuilding. It is turning into a factory process. These days, the Royal Navy, and Britain as a whole, likes to trumpet the fact that we build our ships by building them in sections, smaller sections, and then bringing those sections together. We build them in modules. It's a great methodology. Everyone does it. But realistically, the first large-scale module production of ships we're talking about is the Liberty ship program. And yes, other nations had already been doing this and already been experimenting at various points in their yards, and I know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But it's kind of like when we talk about Henry Ford and the factory program. There have been lots of people who have worked on an assembly line. It's Henry Ford who makes it sing and actually gets the credit for it. Because he turns it from being something which can be done into the thing which will be done. And that's the difference. They take it from a thing we can do, and some of the first factories and the first production lines are actually in the Royal Navy's own Royal Dockyards back in the UK, especially those ones producing things like blocks and tackles for their sailing ships. Even in the Age of Sail, they have them. So they can produce enough for all the sailing ships going around in the Napoleonic Wars. And yet, whilst they're doing that, there are plenty of other places of production which have not gone into a factory, have not gone into a production line, have not started that process. Henry Ford comes along, makes a great success of it with the Ford T, and voila, it becomes the rigueur, the thing you do, how you organise production. And it's the same with the Liberty Ship program. It comes in, and suddenly modular construction, that's the way to go. That is the way we are looking at ships. And it takes a while to progress into ever more complicated ships and complex designs, but it does get up there as everyone becomes experienced with it, understanding it, and knowing how to use it, how to temper its benefits and its weaknesses. But that is a whole debating program. And honestly, it takes them an unsurprising amount of time to get there, because basically their first chair of the US Maritime Commission is this guy, Joseph Kennedy Sr. I know, the same guy who was ambassador to the UK, basically is predicting that America needs to make accommodations to the Nazis because they're going to win. He is not particularly a great chair of the Maritime Commission. He is not someone who actually believes in its mission at all. But realistically, what he does believe in is his own political ascendancy and his own power. And one of the things you cannot fault him is what he does manage to set up the Maritime Commission to be able to do. He does enable it to have the flexibility of purpose and the flexibility of research that it's going to need later on for action. He establishes the power and the shape of the commission so that by necessity, a lot of the power rests with the chair. It's always good when you have a career politician someone who's careerly political, focusing in on the chair of an organisation at the beginning. They tend to establish a position which has a lot of power for them. It's how they set it up and how they function. The thing is, though, he is there for less than 11 months, and in that time, well, not much gets done. Let's be honest, it did take them a few months to actually get round to assigning it to creating the Maritime Commission, even after the Act passes. So, you can forgive them for spending most of those 11 months actually focusing on making a commission, even if it does seem to be spend rather a lot of time furnishing certain parts of the commission, but leave that to one side. Luckily, his role is taken over by this gentleman, Rear Admiral Emery S. Land, and he is the second, final, and only chair, realistically, of the Maritime Commission who realistically actually matters a jot. He's the only one. He was, of course, a US Navy Rear Admiral. All the admirals, after they lose their position, return to Rear Admiral, because that's the highest commission post you get at this point in US Navy. Everything else is a brevet or role position. And as a result, he gets promoted to Vice Admiral in July 1944, after he's actually left the US Navy. And he's not been a member of the US Navy for quite a while at that point. And he is, thank Lord, a pragmatic and capable man. Honestly, he's a practical and capable human. He is good at his job. He is someone who I would love to have dinner with, mainly so I could give him a dinner without discussing anything to do with work or politics, so he could just have a peaceful meal in this period. I don't think he ever got to eat a peaceful one. He was constantly getting hounded by people. People who wanted him to give them jobs. People who wanted him to award contracts to their shipyards. People who wanted him to award contracts to their shipyards in their state. People who wanted him to build massive shipyards inland because that was their state didn't have a coast. People who wanted him to pick their design for a Liberty ship. People who wanted him to... all sorts of things. The interesting thing about Liberty ship design, realistically, is they take a design which the British have ordered, because the British have ordered some merchant ships from America. And he keeps looking around at the various options and the various debates, and he ends up taking the British design, getting it simplified, and turned into a form which can be easily produced by a factory-style process, which does take some work, and uses that. And in many ways he uses that not because it's profoundly brilliant, I know there are some people who claim this, but because honestly, it's the only way he can get the factions to work with him. Because if they don't want any of their other factions to win and get their design across the line. The different competing designs go. They would rather the other side lose than they win, in the terms of the factions he's dealing with. So the only thing you will unite around is a design which is not theirs. I kid you not. Still, with this being stated, this design, he still has a lot of problems with it. He has the fact that even his own president calls them ugly ducklings, because he was looking for a ship which was beautiful, and Land was looking for a ship which was practical, would do the job. There was lots of debates over they weren't fast enough. They don't need to be that fast. They need to get from point A to point B and return to point A again, and they need to do it consistently and stably and constantly. Now, there are going to be issues with the design. There are going to be real issues with design. And famously, of course, there was some problems with them in cold weather, etc., because of the way they were produced, because they were being welded so quickly. But also because the people welding it were not necessarily the most experienced welders. And whilst I realise there are welders in this world who are very certain that if they paid enough per diem, they would be able to weld the hole in the ozone layer shut, the reality is that most welders are average. And welders who are brand new and recently trained, and now are helping weld a whole ship together, well, they weren't there yet. But still, when you consider the fact that so many Liberty ships were built, so many, 2,710 to be precise, out of 2,751 planned, and, well, to put that in context, there were 175 Fletchers completed out of 184 planned. 2,710. These were ships built to provide mass and volume. These were ships built to provide the blood vessels for the arteries and of war that were the sea lines of communication. They did 1,000 jobs, 1,000 different tasks. And whilst yes, they do own some heritage to the ocean class freighters the British had ordered from American yards, they are their own design. They are their own design. And they are a capable design. With that all being said, it is now time for the Shameless book plug. So, before we get too far into this, there's one point which I'm probably going to add in now into the Shameless book plug point, is that I do realise, before anyone starts coming to relate, that the Americans did build their original C2 designs. They did build their Type C2, Type C3, Type C4, and Type C1. They didn't just build the Victories and the Liberties. They also built all their R refrigerator ships, their various tankers, and their Type V tugs, and all sorts of things. They did build and use the yards which had the capability to build those ships. But honestly, the numbers... Well, once you start looking into it and you start going, the numbers are dwarfed by Liberty ship numbers. In fact, the Liberty ships dwarf everything, pretty much, in numbers. The Victory ships, there are 500 of those made. But to even come close in numbers, you are probably talking about things like the Type B barges as individually. All the rest is almost, you could combine them all together, and you'd have about the same number of ships as all the various types of merchant ships and refrigerator ships and tankers combined would, equal roughly the same as the Victory and Liberty ships added together. That's before you start adding in Oceans and other wartime emergency ships. Literally, by the end of World War II, US shipyards have built roughly 5,777 ocean-going merchant ships and naval ships. And those are merchant hulls being used for naval purposes, including things like escort carriers. This is one of the largest construction projects ever conceived by mankind. Once you look into it and start looking into the depth of this, this is a program which dwarfs the scale of even the B-29 program, let alone the Manhattan Project. And it doesn't get nearly as much press. So that's why I was happy to do this video, and that's why I'll do more videos on this topic over the years. And I realised that realistically I need to get Sal on to have a nice Sal Merkelagos, from what is going on about shipping, and to have a nice long discussion about this, and I probably will do. I'll see if he's free for Christmas, and we'll have a nice long chat about it, because it's massive. Now, the Shameless Book Plug is normally where I sit here and I go, thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, helping the channel, watching it, watching the videos, sitting through the adverts, helping it, supporting it, and all the super chats and super thanks and things that help it grow. Thank you. Thank you for doing everything you do which feeds the algorithm. It really does help make it all possible, and this channel really wouldn't be possible without your support. The trips to Japan would not be possible without your support. All the kindness you provide is what makes all this possible. So thank you. Thank you very much. And well, it should be a fun thing. It should be a fun trip indeed. We'll see what we can achieve. Hopefully Japan goes well. Hopefully it's all able to be done. So I'm at the point where in preparing for the Japan trip that it's a case of, like before all the trips, I've sent off emails, I've contacted all the museums, I've theoretically contacted all the people I was supposed to contact, but there are people still coming out of the woodwork who I apparently need to contact as well. And yeah, just crossing my fingers it all works as planned. If it doesn't, I guess I run for the hills screaming. No. In Japan, I'll go seek out the nearest onsen and have a nice relaxing bath, and then get out and then deal with it afterwards. But thank you very much for making it all possible. Thank you. Henry Kaiser was a dam builder. He was a property developer. He was not a shipbuilder. He was an engineer of sorts, a businessman of certainty, and he was profoundly anti-Hitler and anti pretty much everyone, it seems, that wasn't a democracy. He was actually, to an extent, already known by the British before they started placing orders, etc., because of his contacts in his relationship with various people in Britain who were fighting. He'd been trying to support as many as he could. He was not a good man. I would never claim anyone who has managed to accomplish all he has done and achieved all he has done, and in the circumstances he did, to probably be winning a Mother Teresa award. But he was a very capable leader. And when the British went hunting for their first set of ships, and this is how he gets involved in the Liberty Programme, they can't find anyone to build them. The shipyards are all full. America's not an ally yet, but the shipyards are all full, and they're all doing the long-range program of merchant ship production. They're doing the warship production, all these things. They're all full. And Admiral Land says to the British Commission, go and look Todd Yard. Go and talk to Kaiser. He's got an office down there. He's your last chance. It's your last chance. And so they do. And Kaiser goes, yep. It's also worthwhile realizing that this serves Kaiser's interests in another way. He has been campaigning tirelessly to build up infrastructure and industry on the West Coast. He is obsessed with it. He wants their own steel plant, he wants their own weapons manufacturing, he wants their own infrastructure. He wants everything set up there. He's fed up with importing it from elsewhere. He builds dams. He's fed up with importing all the stuff from elsewhere. And that's the critical thing, really. That is the critical point. He is fed up with importing it from elsewhere. And he has formed a conglomerate of sorts. He not only has his own Kaiser shipbuilding, which has 3 shipyards in Richmond, California, Ryan Point, Vancouver, Washington State, and Saur Island, Portland, Oregon. He's also involved in the California Shipbuilding Corporation, CalShip, which included a further 13 yards, give or take, that all used the 6 Companies Group, which he was a member of, and the Joshua Hendy Ironworks of Sunnyvale, California, that they owned, and that built the EC2 triple expansion engines for the Liberty ships, and also for the Ocean class, which he built. No one expected the design of the British design, which was adapted for his yards to produce, to become the base of the Liberty ship program. When he got it, no one did. Least of all Henry Kaiser. But the thing is, he turns the design from being something which was for a yard of moderate skill, but not a lot of skill, required to build it, into something which could be built by majoritively unskilled labour doing repetitive tasks, because he broke the design down into functional purpose work. He turned it into a production line. And this was really the secret of Kaiser. He is probably not going to be in the shipyard industry for a long term. Or if he is, he's got to maintain a amount of production going through which makes it work, because the sheer amount of factories and other systems he has supplying parts. You see, a shipyard works by getting the things in their almost raw forms, i.e. toilets, etc., and these things, and then you can therefore supply goods from a large area, and then building it all together. A shipyard run on a Kaiser methodology, we'll call it the Kaiser methodology, works by really being the final assembly point. It's where all the different sections are brought together. The engines, and all these things, the pre-manufactured modules. And, for example, some of the modules, the things like the bridge and the superstructure, were actually manufactured upside down, and then would be craned on, and flipped over. And various things like that were done because it was the efficient way to do it. It was the efficient way to do it. And these yards require a huge amount of turnover to make them practical and work. But it's able to because of Kaiser, because of the way he structures the program. He creates a system whereby everything is reduced to its simplest methodology. Not necessarily its cheapest. You see, the thing about the system he's designing for, it's not designed for cheapest component, and that's the key point. It's designed for efficiency of construction. And sometimes the cheapest option isn't the most efficient for construction. And that's the point. He's making overall a product which is going to be able to pile them high, stack them deep, because you can, by making it as efficient to produce, which produces a effective price overall, a cheap price overall. But individually, the components themselves were not necessarily the cheapest methodologies. And even then, sometimes the methodologies used were neither the cheapest nor the most efficient individually, but they were most efficient when it came to slotting into the other systems. Because you have to take a whole system approach to it. And this is where, in many ways, his team, not being naval architects, not being naval engineers, helped them. They were used to this system. They were able to look at the process and go, how do we adapt this to this system? They are treating it purely as structural blocks. How do we do this? How do we do X? How do we do Y? How do we do Z? How do we sort of... He talks about ships in terms of the front and the back. This makes other shipyards laugh at him, but they can't compete with him when it comes to this. But there again, no shipyards before or since have had to construct such size ship vessels on such a scale. Such a scale. And that's the really big thing for this. It's the scale of construction. And yes, there's simplicity going on, but it's the scale of the simplicity. So let's start thinking about the efficiency in the design. Well, for starters, you can't rely on the ports you're going to being able to unload you. So you need to have your own derrick cranes for that. So there you go. There are derrick cranes. It's a derrick crane design. It adds complication to the design overall to build it, but getting enough derricks built is always a nightmare. And what do you go with? Wooden ones, metal ones, tubular ones, solid ones? There's all sorts of options for how you go with what derricks and what boom systems you go with, but you're going to need them. You're going to need them. How many holds do you go with? A 5-hold design? Well, that's probably sensible. That's the basic standard. That is the standard. The basic, realistically, it works out as about 6 holds, where 1 hold's for use for your engine room. But yeah, you know, it's a 5-hold design and allows you to carry sort of stuff across 5 different spaces. So you can, to an extent, be organisational with that. You can churn into various goods. They do carry the most flexible form of good carriage known to mankind at that point. The ability to carry bags and pallets and boxes and crates. Anything that can be handled by their cranes. That's all good. Engine-wise, well, the thing is you have a lot more people who know how to use triple expansion engines. It's not going to be as fast, so you lose efficiency that way, but it's easier to build, easier to maintain, easier to find people who are skilled in its usage. And you're not going to get in the way of the important war building projects going on, which are soaking up all the turbines quickly. The warships. That's the criteria for turbines, isn't it? So yeah, we'll go with triple expansion engines. Alright. But what about the rest? What are we going to do about the accommodation spaces? Well, traditionally you've had them split all over the place, but at this point they're basically combining everything together. Why? It's more efficient from a damage control perspective, from a crew survivability perspective, and that's also important. Why is it more efficient to have the crew in one place from a crew survivability perspective? So people aren't trapped below. People aren't asleep when they're hit and trapped below. People aren't in a different part of the ship which might not get a warning quickly enough. People are in a space where they can go either way to get on lifeboats to get off the ship. And crew survivability is going to matter. Because if there had been one lesson from World War I, it was that it was easier to replace ships than it was merchant sailors. It really was. So there you go, you've got that included. And it carries on, you know, the size, the shaping, all these things come down to what are we really going to need? It's not what do we want, it's what do we need. It's not what can we do, it's what do we need to do. Or rather, it's not what we can do from a design perspective. This is not the best design that they could produce. This is not the best ship they could build. This is not the best type of merchant vessel they could build this time. There are plenty of examples to them. The C2 is probably better than this one. But this will do what you need to be done, and you can build it in the volume you need to do so. And that's the real lesson going on here. You know, we talk about the C2, and that's realistically the major focus. It really is, realistically is the major focus that's equivalent to this. And yet they will build 328 of them in World War II versus 2,710 of the Liberty ships. And quite literally, if you look at the two designs, if you look at them, the C2s are gorgeous looking ships. They really are. The Type C2s are gorgeous looking ships. But their lines, everything, it requires so much work to deliver that. This design is about efficiency. It's about their purpose. And their purpose is very simple. And by the way, these pictures, they come from this book. Just to point this out. There you go. They come from this book. From the Liberty ships. And I went with the designs in here rather than Marsh's designs because honestly, the details in here give you more about the design, I would argue. They do. They tell you why this vessel was designed as it was. They were given subdivision. Not because it made life easy, but because subdivision gives them a chance of surviving. An example of that is the William Williams, which was torpedoed in the Pacific, and it was presumed the damage was so severe that frankly no pre-war built merchant ship could have taken similar punishment and survived the ordeal, because they built in subdivision. They weren't going to build in armor, but they built in subdivision. They built in all sorts of things to keep the ships afloat, because the important thing was getting the cargo to the destination. And the second most important thing after that was the survival of the crew. And the best lifeboat for the crew is the ship itself. That will always be the best lifeboat. So once you consider these are your criteria, getting the cargo to the destination, which means getting the volume of cargo to the destinations. If you need to do a fast run, you use one of the fewer, more expensive, more difficult to build, faster merchant ships. But for the vast majority of operations and convoy operations, you can afford to wait on a Liberty ship. You can afford to wait on something which does between 11 and 11.5 knots on a good day. You can afford to wait on something which is powered by 2 oil-fired boilers. A single screw driven by a triple expansion steam engine. Usually, with some guns mounted on them for various ASW and anti-aircraft defences, and a range of crew, depending on the cargo they're carrying. They could have up to 62 merchant mariners aboard. Normally it was more closer to 38. Again, it's about efficiency of numbers of personnel. And they could have between 21 and 40 US naval gunners, Navy Armed Guard. A very interesting group, an interesting body, that basically are formed during World War II to protect US merchant shipping by providing the armed personnel aboard, the gunners. Which is probably better than some of the British methodologies, because some of the British ships, they fit the guns and train the merchant sailors how to use them and tell them to go off and have fun. On most of them they do put something equivalent to an actual fighting party aboard, but on some of them they just train the merchant sailors. Not that the merchant mariners were at all upset about that. No, they often preferred that because they felt they would be properly motivated. But we'll leave that to one side. These ships, they are built around the focus of efficiency of delivery. Efficiency of construction comes from the efficiency of delivery because you need a volume of them. Efficiency of construction puts on a certain perspective on the efficiency of design. But each of these efficiencies, it's the perspective. The perspective on the volume of goods needing to move means that maximum volume must arrive at the destination. Efficiency of construction means that you must be able to build them as quickly, but most importantly, as quickly, but as risk-free as possible. I.e., they must have a very high record of service. And if, again, we go to those old stats of the Liberty ships, and we talk about how many of them into service, 2,710. 2,710. And a lot of them survived. Yes, in terms of construction, there are hull cracks, especially in some of the ones from the Kaiser yards, although they do operate in the colder regions where you're going to find out about welding issues far more quickly. Far more quickly, where things where metal contracts rather than expands. And they provided the most of the ships which operated in those regions. But leaving that to one side, then that, again, the actual number of them that actually had that happen was less. It was not that lot. Not a lot at all. And as I said, it goes from efficiency of transportation, volume, efficiency of the construction, and then efficiency of the design. What are we designing in? What are we picking out when we're looking at? What is the efficiency metric we're looking at? And that's an interesting point of us to think about in terms of year leadership, because often in modern projects, when they're talking about efficiency, they're talking about cost efficiency. And that means you're designing it for efficiency of cost, not efficiency of use, or efficiency of construction, or efficiency of maintenance, but efficiency of cost. And the thing is, you might translate efficiency of cost and go, well, what am I looking at for efficiency of cost? Well, is it my through life cost? In which case, maybe I will design it for efficiency of maintenance. Is it my build cost? In which case, maybe I don't design it for efficiency of maintenance, but maybe I design it for efficiency of construction. All these things are a factor, and we have to think about them. Because this is the point in leadership. And this is the point when you're talking about Henry Kaiser. What was he bringing to the program? What did he bring to the ocean class program? What did he bring to the Liberty ship program? He brought an understanding of what is the efficiency you're designing for. You look at the criteria of your project. What is the success value of your project? And that is the efficiency you design for. And this is often forgotten in modern projects. It becomes automatically efficiency of cost. Whereas if you're designing, let's say, something for efficiency of transportation, let's say you were designing a modern railway system for a nation. Efficiency of transportation, moving people around as they need to be moved in the most efficient manner possible, often leads you to a railway. But if you're looking at it from a national cost perspective, it's roads. Why? Because people buy and maintain their own cars, pay taxes when they buy them, pay taxes for maintenance of the road, pay taxes for every step of the way, and that's going to probably overall generate the most revenue for lowest cost for the government involved. But it isn't the most efficient for transportation. It's a cost efficiency. Now, I happen to like driving. I'm a bit of a car nut. I enjoy my driving. But even I admit, when I'm looking at some of the long distance drives, or if I'm going to go up to London, because I now live down in Cornwall, I'd get on the train because, frankly, I don't want to deal with the car parking that is known as driving in London. It's just not fun. Especially now I'm used to Cornish roads, where for most of the year, I don't have anyone else on there with me. It's brilliant fun. But that's a personal efficiency metric. And it's again, the point I'm trying to make here, is that the Liberty ship program is one where the leadership decided on a very basic framework for their efficiency. And it was centered around volume of goods transported, volume of goods moved. That was the efficiency they were looking for. And it was the right one to do. So overall, one of the things you find with leadership is prioritization. Leadership is not just about making nice speeches. Leadership is about making decisions. And that means you have to come up with a criteria of decision making. Something which you can follow and something which your subordinates can work with. And usually if you're talking to me and I'm in a leadership position, I will talk about my order of priority, i.e. what I have put first. Let's be honest, I'm currently involved in organising several trips for ShipShape. I'm organising conferences, etc., and working with them. And it's a case of, okay, how do we do things? What do we do? Well, there's key stakeholders you need to get involved for a certain conference. Then you need to sort out the venue, and then you need to sort out the funding. That can be part of the key stakeholders, but honestly, in my experience, key stakeholders rarely want to trump out much money. So it's once you've got them involved, so you've got the cachet of them, and then you've got the venue set up, then you go to particular organisations which might fund you, and you go, look, this is what I've already got, can you give me some money? And then you start organising things like keynotes and call for speakers and all the other stuff. That's how you run a conference. When you're approaching a task like building an individual ship, well, you might be tempted to start off with, what's the budget? That's an overriding criteria. What's the purpose of the ship? What's the role of the ship? The interesting thing about the Liberty ship program is it's not about a ship. It's about a class of ships. It is about providing a fleet of merchant vessels. It is about recapitalizing an entire generation of merchant ships. Think about that. 2,710 out of 5,700 and something vessels actually built are Liberty ships. That is a huge number. And this is the point. When I listen to some people discuss the Liberty ships and as a program, they're talking about individual ships, and they're saying, well, you know, they could have added this in, they should have added this, they should have had this, they should have had that, you know, all these things. They should have been turbine powered, they should have been faster, they should have been had better looking hulls, have ridden better in the water, and all those things. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. All those things are true if you are evaluating them as an individual ship and you are building an individual ship. But you are not building an individual ship. You are building 2,710 ships. 2,710 completed during World War II. That's the difference. It's like when we're talking about building class of destroyers, and people talk about going, well, ooh, could they have done this or this or this? And you're going, no, they built 20 of them. The thing was, they were wanting them to be good in the aggregate. An individually perfect ship might be great, but if you won't get out enough of them that you can't do the missions. Let's be honest. Let's put this another way. Let's say you do go for a turbine-powered vessel. Okay? There is a good example of them. They're called the Victory class. They are literally the turbine version of the Liberty ship. That's what they did. They gave them a turbine so they could go faster. 15 to 17 knots rather than mere 11 knots or 11.5 knots. Now, admittedly, some of them used one used a Lentz type reciprocating steam engine. Well, planned to. It wasn't actually built, and one used a diesel engine, but the rest all used steam turbines. But they completed 534 of those. They're better. They are better. And, you know, they are not that much more per ship. A Liberty ship costs roughly $2 million per ship. A Victory ship costs, what, $2.5 million per ship? Well, no, a little bit over 2.5, but not much over $2.5 million a ship. You know, in the aggregate, when you're building in the terms of the thousands, what does really $500,000 add on? Oh, rather a lot, but we'll leave that to one side. But realistically, let's say you do go with the $2.5 million ones, which means for the same amount of money, and let's say complication in construction, and there are 18 shipyards building Liberty ships overall, $2.5 million versus $2 million means you get, for every 5 of the Liberty ship, you could get 4 Victories. So instead of 2,710, you could maybe get 2,000. 2,000. Well, you've got 200 left over. Divide by 5 times by 4. 2,160. And they can travel faster. But that's, of course, if you can get 2,160 turbines, or the size you need. Which means you're going to have to do a lot of work on your program with your destroyers and your cruiser programs and all the systems which are trying to use those turbines. That's going to cause you trouble. So probably actually in the end you won't be able to get 2,000. You'll probably get about 1,000. And yes, they're able to do 15 to 17 knots if everything's working okay, but that's probably going to be 15. And then of course if they're in convoys which are mixed convoys with older ships, many of them can't do more than 12 knots. Some of them can do roughly 10 knots. Okay, so you've put all this money to give them extra speed, but they can't actually use it. And now you've got like half the ships, or you've just 2/5 of the ships you actually originally wanted. That doesn't help, does it? They're better ships, yes. No one's going to argue that they are not better ships. But they're not delivering what you want. The Liberty ship program is about a class of ships. It's about the order of priority. And the order of priority, as I've said multiple times, but I'm going to keep hammering it home because I've read multiple books, I've watched multiple videos, and they all think it's critiquing the individual ship design that matters. Liberty ship program is about the aggregate efficiency of volume delivery. That's why they go with an adapted ocean class design. Because it adapts to the politics, but also it works. It'll do. They've got the design basis for it. They can modify it up and they can get it to work for them, and it will work. It'll do the job. It's not great. It's not going to do the job spectacularly, but it's going to get it done. And guess what? You can get all 50 of them that you need to get it done. You can get all 500 of them. You can get all 1,000 of them. You can get, well, let's be honest, 2,710 of them. You ordered 2,751. So, 41 gone. They are ships which were built, a class which was built to be produced at scale, at volume, to provide the necessary efficiency of transport you needed for a modern global war. I don't think there's ever been a program quite like it before or since. I really don't. I think the leadership of those involved, from the US Maritime Commission, Henry Kaiser and all the others, is something to be applauded. I would love to see the movie about them. There's been a movie about the Manhattan Project. I would love to see a movie about these people. But I doubt it would get the same treatment. It would not get the same reverence. Because it's just building ships. And who cares? It's just building ships. There's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing cool about it. There's nothing that's going to set the world on fire. There's some characters in there that will probably get abused. Probably would be. Because do they fit in the modern world's views of politics? Probably not. They were people of their time. They expressed the views of their time. It's not what we'd agree with today. It's not what we'd espouse today. It doesn't mean they were bad people in their time. Curious enough, Kaiser might be one of the few people who was safe from that. But, well, he was good in that what he cared about, whenever it came to people, was how well they could do their job for him. And as a criteria to evaluate people, that's not a bad one to have when you're an employer. building an empire. How well can the people around you do the job for you seems to be a pretty fair way to assess them. So that being said, I'm talking about a Liberty ship program. I want you to think about the order of priority for the Liberty ship program. And I want you to think, what would happen if a government launched a similar thing today? What would they build? And would they use the same order of priority, or would they do something different? Because we are in an era where, frankly, a lot of our merchant shipping probably needs recapitalization. But good luck finding the merchant mariners to crew them. The answer to that probably is going to be increased automation, but automation can only take you so far. It's got a bright future, I do agree, but at the moment it's still got limits. It still has limits. What else have we got coming up? Well, we have the Leadership of Liberty, which is on the 16th, and we have US Carrier Task Force Leadership at Coral Sea, Midway and Atlantic Gulf, according to the Royal Navy, thanks to the Royal Navy's own book about the subject and their own topic, own discussions on it. I thought it'd be an interesting thing to talk about leadership and the US Navy performance on that, as the Royal Navy was looking at it contemporaneously. It's an interesting thing to consider. What was the Royal Navy thinking from the reports they're receiving of what the US were up to? Did they think, oh, they're doing well, or did they think, why did they do that? I will say a lot of it's, why did they do that? There's a lot they understand, there's a lot they don't understand. In that the Royal Navy's been sending them a lot of information over the years, and the US naval attaches have been sending them a lot of information about things like air defense of carrier groups at sea in the Mediterranean. And then they read some of the US Navy's air defense reports and going, they've been getting information from us for like the last 2.5 years? Yep. Why then? No idea. Okay. But to be fair, and in their defence, they also didn't pay attention to the guy who said, oh look, the Royal Navy's just shown that you can attack a fleet in harbour with aircraft. So, who would expect them to pay attention to the fighter defence reports? Similarly, their own fighter pilots were paying attention to it, but actually getting the fleet to actually organise itself around the way it could actually facilitate it was proving very difficult for them. There's a lot of people who are paying attention going, look, what they're doing, we'd like to do something similar. We have our own ideas. Look, they're validating the ideas we had from the 1930s. And they're still not listening, it's just... And then people usually go, well, it's Battleship Admirals who aren't listening. No, it's not Battleship Admirals. No. All the Battleship Admirals are actually listening, because they realise they need the aircraft carriers to provide them with air defence so that they can get in range to do the job with their guns. No. The people who aren't listening are the administrators and politicians are back at home who aren't allocating the funds necessary to do things. But again, that is a whole video coming up, and that's going to be a fun one. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and take care. If you liked the video, please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow, and it's really nice for me. Thank you very much. Take care, and hope you have a nice time.